Hello, fight fans. It is Monday, April 24th, 2017. This is the Monday Morning Analyst. I am the host of this podcast, Luke Thomas. Thank you so much for joining me here on MMAfighting.com. 3 parts to the podcast, as always. A review of what happened over the past weekend. We take a look with some multimedia tools at something in particular, something specific, and then we take a look at what's coming up in the weeks ahead, which we will all do today. The primary focus we'll have today, 2 events, Bellator 178, and of course, UFC Fight Night 108, UFC Nashville, UFC Fight Night, Swanson versus Lobov. So, without further ado, let's get to that now. Okay, if you want some more thoughts, some initial reactions that I had with UFC Fight Night, you can check out my post-fight show. I'll put a link up here that you can check that out as well. But let's get to some of these results if we can and talk more about them. This took place at the Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, Tennessee, with a reported attendance of 10,144 for a total gate of 755,000. In the main event, Cub Swanson defeating Artem Lobov 249-46 150-45 in the featherweight division. There was a little bit of debate about this. What would you say? Clearly the right guy won. Cub Swanson deserved to win. But would you say Lobov proved he's a top contender? Would you say he got outclassed? I have noticed there's been a real big discrepancy in how people have been talking about this result. Often split along geographic lines, often split along certain loyalties, maybe just even impressions. From folks I know who were there in attendance, they didn't feel like Lobov really did a whole lot. Certainly on TV, people were critical of the commentary team for not really giving Lobov their credit. There might be something to said for that. I don't think that's the most egregious problem. I would say this, look, at the end of the day, my general impression is that Lobov is not a bad fighter. Number one, he's a massively improved fighter from his days in The Ultimate Fighter. But look, he is a little limited. He's a little limited. There's just not a lot of fluidity in his striking. He can get a good game plan together, but adjustments in the middle of a fight or between rounds or that kind of thing, even on the fly, it just doesn't have a whole lot of it. He's got good wrestling and decent power, but you know, he doesn't really pass guard a whole lot. He can't really hold a guy down. He doesn't really go for the back that well. He's got good submission defense, right? You saw Cub Swanson take his back, but all this is to say he's a good fighter. He's a fine fighter. He's just not a particularly elevated one. But the truth is, there were a lot of people heading into that contest who thought he was terrible, who didn't deserve to be there. Why is an unranked guy there? And I'll be admitted, I echoed some of those concerns as well. And generally speaking, I think that main events for any kind of UFC event should be generally exclusionary. They should be for ranked guys or some other majorly compelling contest. But in this particular case, I would say that Lobov fought up to his potential and maybe passed it. He did not go away easily. He took Cub's best shots. People are like, well, he delivered more shots than Edgar. Right, but Edgar took Cub Swanson down a lot and then passed guard a lot. I mean, that's a little bit different. Like, look at the way Holloway and Edgar slowly took not merely the best that Cub had to offer, but took away what Cub had to offer at all, and then began to put their offense on him on super exclusive terms. I mean, Lobov never even came close to that. You know, he just was able to withstand the attack, deliver some of his own, and look, I think generally you should have a lot of praise for Artem Lobov. I think that what he did was pretty impressive, given at least what expectations I had for him. I would say he's massively improved and deserves credit for it. And look, I use the words that Cub Swanson outclassed him. Some people took issue with that. I don't really think so. I mean, look at those scores. I had it 49-46. I would give the first round to Lobov, but after that, Cub just basically ran away with it. He was never really in trouble. I know Lobov said he was never in trouble, but he got rocked a couple times, even if just for a second. And he was certainly just, you know, a little confused about which direction to go when his weapons had less effect, and he got kind of away from those leg kicks as the rounds went on, which were really important for his first round score, in my judgment. You know, he just didn't have anything else for Cub Swanson. So I take my hat off to both guys. Cub definitely needs a break. We'll see what happens if he gets to fight or if it's Yair Rodriguez versus Frankie Edgar. It'll be hard to say, but you just saw why Cub Swanson's a highly ranked guy. I did have concerns coming off of that last win over Duho Choi if he really taken too much punishment. But in the end, he fought in a way that, you know, look, Cub Swanson is the most mature version of himself that he's ever been. And you might say, well, Luke, he's also, you know, He's older now. Well, of course he'd be mature, but not everyone. It's not a given. Not every guy really makes that journey to the best version of themselves and does so in a way that produces the kinds of competitive results that they're looking for. And they really gave Cub a chance to get back on the horse. I know he hadn't lost, but I mean, after a tough fight like that against Choi, and he showed you how good he is. Maybe Rodriguez or Edgar will get the next title shot, but I wouldn't mind it if Cub got one. Iaquinta taking on Diego Sanchez, 138 of the first round. I thought the odds on this one, I didn't mind that Iaquinta was the favorite, but I was like, I don't know. Diego at plus 350, that seems awful high. Nope. This is exactly the way it should have been. The odds makers were totally right. Iaquinta just absolutely showing his skills in a way that undeniable. Really having the practical effect of serving as a tune-up fight, although his future seems very much in doubt. But nevertheless, really just accurate, patient punching. There's a time there where he had backed Diego up against the fence, which is, by the way, where he had problems against Joe Lauzon at UFC 200 as well. All these guys, they get up against the fence and then they get tall, and they get bombed on from there. But you could just see he waited just a second to have the right distance and then the right angle, and then he popped him with the right and dropped him. And then, of course, he had excellent finishing skills. Just brilliant work by Iaquinta, showing that I don't know what that thing he does where he does the high-end eye coordination with the lights on the board and he has to touch them. Maybe that really is having a tremendous impact, because if you look on paper, his shots sometimes seem a little bit wide. There's a little bit of a crook in his elbow when he throws. They're not quite as mechanically efficient as you would want them to be. But man, in real time, they look perfect. They looked so efficient, so accurate, so powerful, so dominating. And he throws, he throws with bad intentions too. Like he throws the most you could throw with bad intentions without compromising, I think, his mechanics. And you really have to take your hat off to him. Incredible return after 2 years. Ovince Saint Preux defeating Marcos Rogerio de Lima, Von Flue choke at 2:11 of the second round, or the Von Preux, or the Von Saint Preux, whatever you want to call it. So here's what we're going to do. If you also want to take a look up in the screen here, I'm going to post my link to my breakdown with Brian Barberina and Sage Northcutt, which was also a Von Flue finish, and also a Von Flue finish from half guard, although a little bit of a different one. There are many variations of this. All I'll say is this, and I'm going to say it for Michael McBride. I'm going to say it for Cindy Dandois as well. We do a lot of times where, we'll make fun of a guy or a lady for not having the requisite skill to compete at this level. But that's not really their fault. And De Lima might have the skill to compete at this level generally, but on the ground there's some issues. We'll get to that in the second segment. We're going to look more about this in the second segment, because a lot of folks asked me to break down this Von Flue choke, so that's what we're going to do. But I just want to say, if a fighter doesn't have the requisite skills to compete at a certain level, it's not their fault, man. Like, they're doing the best they can. Now, they've downgraded from something, that's different. But if they're like off the regional scene and they get called up, that's on the UFC, And De Lima, I know, was part of the Ultimate Fighter, so it's a little bit different. But I just want to say, like, sometimes we have this reaction where we want to say something bad about a guy or a lady who doesn't perform up to a level that we're accustomed. And it's not that we shouldn't say that they didn't do that. We have to talk honestly about what we see. But at the same time, like, who's the one that signed them? You have to ask. I would argue that the most of the responsibility there for producing that kind of product. If you're signing a guy like Michael McBride, he can't strike up to this level anyway. He can't. He's a very good grappler, but you get my point. So we'll talk more about this in the second segment, but it was a great Von Flue choke by Ovince Saint Preux. He knows exactly what he's doing. De Lima kind of served it up to him, but he took it and ran with it, so I take my hat off to him. But we'll take a look at that in close detail in the second segment. John Dodson versus Eddie Wineland, winning with unanimous decision, 230-27 to 129-28. I actually watched this in fast forward a couple of times, and it looks like the same fight on repeat. Just these two going around the whole time, the whole time. There's not really much to it. Dodson able to, as a southpaw, able to really land the left of the body at will, slowly able to chip up top, able to put combinations together when he could land the first one and then back Wineland up in a straight line. But Dodson's ability to pivot, Dodson's ability to get out of range and parry and then counter, Dodson's ability to fake up top and then go up high very quickly, but really the one about getting out of range. Like, if Dodson doesn't want you to hit him and wants to fight in a way where he's thinking about that, you're going to have to be very, very good to find him. And Eddie Wineland is a very good fighter, but he wasn't up to the task with this one. Dodson's ability, he is so light on his feet. He can cut angles. He can get in a range, out of range. He can bob, weave, turn. It's pretty amazing what he can do on his feet. So, like, he doesn't throw a whole lot of offense behind it. I think that might be one of the criticisms. Like, Tenshin Nasukawa was able to lean, turn, and then throw and still land with devastating effect. So all that motion mutes Dodson's offense a little bit, but he's hard to hit, man. He's really hard to hit. So I gather that the fans aren't overly excited about this one, but, you know, Dodson's a nightmare for matchup for just so many guys. Stevie Ray defeating Joe Lauzon, 29-27, 28, 27, 28, 28. I would have it for Stevie Ray, 10-8 first round Lauzon, 10-9 Stevie Ray, 10-8 Stevie Ray. I know one judge did not have a 10-9, or rather I should say had a 10-9 for Lauzon in the first and a 10-8 for Stevie. I don't quite understand that. Now in my post-fight show I said, man, I thought Lauzon was flirting with getting stopped there. Not saying he should have been stopped, not saying that, but just saying there was a moment there the last 10 seconds, Ray was just uncorking him, and all Lauzon was doing was just covering up. That's all he was doing. I went back and I watched it again because I saw Lauzon said, you know, I felt like I had blocked a lot of those shots, particularly those elbows in the clinch in the third with his elbows. And in real time, I guess I didn't appreciate that. I went back and I watched. That is true, actually. Now, I still think it was a 10-8 for Stevie Ray in the third, but I'll give credit to Lauzon. He was getting bombed on, but he was protecting himself pretty good. Some snuck through, obviously. He was getting cracked, but not as many as I initially had thought. On the ground, major discrepancy in skill. But what I'll say let me just say something. I am a big fan of attempting leg locks on someone if you have trouble getting up to your feet, right? And the reason why I believe in that is because a lot of times what guys will do is if you set up the right kind of attack, they will try and stand up and pull away, right? A certain kind of knee bar. But what a lot of guys are doing is they're getting underneath for like a single leg X almost, or a kuru-kuru guard, which we saw Conor McGregor do on Nate Diaz, you know, which is like a single leg X, but like with an overhook as opposed to an underhook. And what happens is the guy will just put their base on top. They don't ever need to turn away. In fact, turning away would be detrimental to them in certain circumstances. What you want to do is if there's a discrepancy and you're worried about a guy passing and you're worried about a guy bombing on you, in this case Stevie Ray was getting bombed on in that first round, he kept trying a couple of leg entanglements. But the heel hook is one only tried if you're really just trying to get them to spin so you can create space and get out of the way. I would say it would be better to go for a knee bar, almost like what you saw Tanquinho doing, like an omoplata setup even. And because that way they have to turn away and get away from you. That's the way out. I mean, there's other ways to beat that too, right? But I'm saying it's a common reaction. That's the kind of leg entanglement I think fighters should be looking for underneath if they're trying to do that to stop a pass or to disrupt a guy's rhythm. That to me seems a lot better. Mike Perry defeating Jake Ellenberger. Jesus Christ. Good Lord. Good Lord, that was vicious. Wow. Mike Perry, an incredible shot. I went back and watched this like you did a number of times. The guy made it on ESPN's, I think, top 7, the top 10 plays of the day or whatever it was, the highlights. He did a really good job. You know, Ellenberger had his moments. Ellenberger didn't look bad, you know, and he was able to freeze Perry a lot with fakes and feints and stance switches. If there's a criticism of Perry, it's that, yes, once he has you hurt, he is absolutely deadly, and he's got big power, and he's willing to throw. And he's able to make adjustments between fights. Like, Perry is a naturally good fighter. I don't know how far he can go, you know, but he's at you between camps, man. I'm telling you, this guy gets way better. He was getting frozen a little bit, but the problem was Ellenberger was switching stances. He was mindful of the distance. He was doing good about like controlling wrist and collar ties in the clinch and actually firing some uppercuts, at least early in that second and part of the first rounds. But he didn't throw enough through that movement. It was a lot of fakes and feints and then nothing behind it, or stance switches and then circling out. And yes, that would freeze Perry, but you got to put it on him after that. And so I don't know why he didn't throw enough. I mean, he did have his moment in the first round there a little bit, but I just feel like Mike Perry is a much better fighter than you would think. You think these guys with face tattoos, you know, these are just sort of prison brawlers. And he certainly is rough around the edges, but it's not fair to him to look at him that way. He is a very talented welterweight. There's just no two ways about it. He is a really good fighter. Now, this raises a question about Ellenberger and Sanchez as well as Lauzon, which is how much longer do these guys anticipate competing? Ellenberger is now in the first fight of a 4-fight deal. That doesn't mean the UFC won't necessarily cut him, but just keep that in mind. Sanchez got a CAT scan and said everything's great. I can't believe, well, then it sounds like to me like the CAT scan's a very crude method of measuring brain health. And Lauzon was able, I think, to save himself the worst of a beating, but, you know, as much of a warrior as he's been all these years, he's been a warrior all these years. There's a real open question. You saw Anthony Johnson put up a post about it. It's like, how much longer do these guys anticipate doing this? I think the most difficult one is Lauzon is fighting guys like Stevie Ray, where he can still keep himself safe. It's still very competitive. Sanchez going up against Iaquinta, you know, he literally can't protect himself against the best this division has to offer. And so there probably needs to be, if they're going to continue to give him fights, a serious downgrade in ranking. And in Ellenberger, you know, I wouldn't, if he called it off his career tomorrow, I'd be okay with that. I mean, it's not my call. It's not your call. It's only his. But that was a scary KO. He's been hurt a lot recently. He had a nice win against Matt Brown, which he really needed, but then he dropped 2 more in a row. The bad one against Masvidal, which was weird, but then this was bad. This was really, really bad. These are his last few fights, just so it's clear. So before the Brown one, the last one he won was, okay, so let's go back. He loses to Martin Kampmann in 2012. Then he beats Jay Heron and Nate Marquardt in 2013. From there, he lost to Rory McDonald, Robbie Lawler, Kelvin Gastelum. He got submitted in one of those and stopped with strikes in the other one. He beats Josh Koscheck. Then he loses to Wonderboy and then Safadine. Then he beats Matt Brown. Then he gets stopped with Jorge Masvidal and stopped by Mike Perry. It's a lot. It's a lot, man. That might be time to call it a day. But we'll see. Talis Laitis defeating Sam Alvey, an absolutely terrible fight. Brandon Moreno defeating Dustin Ortiz. What can you say about Brandon Moreno? Wow. What an exciting flyweight prospect. Really happy to see guys out of Latin America, some of these smaller weight classes, begin to really develop as legitimate talents. Dustin Ortiz is a horse, man. That is a very, very legitimate victory in my view. Dustin Ortiz is athletic, an excellent scrambler, good everywhere, defensively strong. As my colleague R.J. Clifford pointed out, this dude got bellied out on a front face. You know, he got hit and then bellied out front face and still managed to get up, which you almost never see. A lot of times there's guys who fall backwards and then sort of wake up and they can go at it again. He got sent down face first, which John McCarthy has also said is worse than falling backwards. Anyway, long story short, he's a durable, tough veteran who has fought the best, has beaten a lot of good guys for a long time. I thought Justin Scoggins might be that guy at flyweight, but now he's at bantamweight. He's had weight issues. He's had some scrambling issues. He's had some fight IQ issues. And we'll see what happens with Brandon Moreno. He's still very early in his career, but my God, this guy is getting better fast, very fast, winning against legitimate guys in very totally legitimate ways. Just to me, the big takeaway from him is recognizing offensive opportunities and running with them. Really has a good sense about that, you know? Really has a good sense about, a lot of guys will see openings and they just don't throw. We just talked about with Jake Ellenberger. That's not a problem that Moreno has. He absolutely believes in the power of his offense. He believes in the power of recognition and to marry the two. You really have to take your hat off to that guy. He's a real talent. And then his submission skills, the hand fighting, and the thing I was most impressed by, go back and watch. I mentioned this on my post-fight show after the event. Go back and watch this guy as he's fighting the hands and the ankle grabs and like the attempted leg entanglements that Ortiz was trying as he's getting his up to the fence, his wall walking in that first round. Very good. Very good. Playing whack-a-mole with him. As soon as Ortiz would try something, he was springing a leak somewhere else, and Ortiz would try to plug that leak, and Moreno would try something else, and it just wasn't enough. He couldn't keep up. Moreno, very, very good takedown defense against the cage. Less so in open space. You know, a good guy who's been wrestling as long as Ortiz has, you know, he's going to hit a blast double in the middle, but the self-belief, the offensive recognition, the offensive decision-making, and the relentlessness of his attack, man, I hope they don't give him to Demetrius Johnson too soon, because that might be the next big thing at flyweight. Very, very talented fighter. Scott Holtzman defeating Michael McBride. I'm not going to bag on McBride, man. His grappling is absolutely worthy of being at this level. The striking is not, and that's not his fault. That's the fault of him being signed when maybe he's not really ready for this level yet. I get that they have to put shows together, and they got to give guys fights, and they got to keep the roster moving, but I'm not going to bag on him. I'm not going to say too much about it. Holtzman, stealing on McBride at times, just couldn't seem to ever put him away, but winning 30-26 on one of the judges' scorecards, which seems totally fine by me. Danielle Taylor defeating Jessica Penny, 29-28. Penny seeming surprised that she had lost. I don't know why. Danielle Taylor is very short, but had absolutely the correct game plan. Looked almost like the Esparza fight from The Ultimate Fighter. Circle, 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 get in, pop, 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 get out of the way, duck and turn and get out. I mean, it's just the same, right? Throw combinations, put the work behind the jab, exit as soon as you throw combinations. Be mindful of a counterattack, but a slow one and a linear one. The problem with Jessica Penny is what she's really, really talented at is grappling. Getting on top, man. She'll murder you on top. She's got vicious elbows. She's a naturally good grappler. She can do a lot on top and on bottom. And she was having a lot of success in the clinch. I kept saying to myself, don't even worry. I mean, go for the takedown. If you get it, great. If not, use it for a clinch entanglement and then body her. She was doing that very, very well. The problem is she gets in this mode where she just kind of starts striking. She didn't go for a takedown until very late, and I didn't understand it. Like, Jessica Penny seems like she has good striking, but it's like Joban. Some people don't have this anticipatory skill to get out of the way real fast, to make quick motions, to know when something's coming and to react to it. Taylor certainly had the speed advantage, and as a consequence, this was a fight I thought Penny could have won, and she didn't, Alexis Davis defeating Cindy Dandois, 29-28 across the board. Absolutely one of the worst fights I've ever seen in the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Brian Barberena defeating Joe Proctor, 3:30 of the first round. These two inviting each other. No, you throw it down. No, you throw it down. Not as good as Holloway Lamas, but look, Barberena's talented, man. He's got accurate striking. He's able to find it, a target right down the middle when he has to. And there's not much more to say to this one. Proctor made himself available for it. It got finished as a consequence. Now, Brian Stanton had noted that Proctor covers up a little bit too much. That's something you could probably say. I think Barberena's just on a different level anyway. But be careful what you wish for. And then Hector Sandoval defeating Matt Schnell. Matt Schnell's a guy who trains hard, who looks like he gives it his all. I don't know if he has the skill to compete at this level. It's a bit of an open question, and I know he's a guy who came from that MTV show, and I have a lot of respect for him. But if you're getting hammer-fisted to sleep in your guard, I think that some of those guillotine defenses by Sandoval, while very much not technical, probably had an effect, cumulatively, and so then the hammer fist just finished him off. So a nice win by Sandoval, but Matt Schnell just seems to always be dealing with someone else's offensive terms. Whenever he fights guys, they set the offensive terms, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if you're a great counter fighter, or you have the ability to change things on a dime sometimes, or to really be patient and wait for your time to throw or attempt something. But if you're just always on someone else's terms, it's just going to be hard, man. It's just going to be really hard for you. So your bonus winners: Cub Swanson versus Artem Lobov for Fight of the Night, Performance Night, Mike Perry, and Brandon Moreno. Easy call on those. I know Iaquinta wanted one. In a perfect world, he would deserve one, but that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. So, great job by those guys. Real quickly, Bellator 178. This took place at the Mohegan Sun Arena. I don't trust these Wikipedia numbers, so I'm not going to read them to you anymore. Patricio Freire in the fourth fight, defeating Daniel Strauss via submission. It looked to me like Daniel Strauss had incredible ring rust. Now, the Pitbull brothers, particularly Patricio, boy, is he not a really talented guy? This guy has been a warhorse for that division and that organization for a long time, and he still looks like he's full of vinegar and piss, despite some of the wars he's been in and some of the tough fights that he's had and some of the losses that he's had. Clearly the better of the two brothers, but, it looked like to me like Daniel Strauss has had incredible ring rust. Keep in mind his competitive schedule prior to this. And I'd asked him about it, and he was like, what do you want me to do? Like, what can I do? His last fight before this one was also Patricio, which came in November of 2015. It's just such a long time off. He missed all of 2016 and most of 2015, and then the first quarter of 2017. It's just too much time against a guy who is always on like that in Patricio Freire. So eventually getting caught with a guillotine choke 37 seconds in like it was nothing. These guys match up well typically. One of the reasons why I like this fight and this matchup for the fourth time is, number one, sort of a Coker calling card. But I think more than that, we don't have a lot of rivalries in MMA based strictly on competitive results. And in this particular case, it looks to me at this point that Patricio is the better fighter. But we have all these rivalries and like so-and-so left Team Alpha Male, or this guy said this about my mama, or, you know, we started talking on Twitter, and that's fine, man. It's like, that's a part of the game. I get it. But it's nice to have two guys who have really nothing bad to say about each other necessarily, but meet up a bunch of times and compete to their best every time when they match up and always deliver good action. And those, I mean, this fight was a little bit, you know, a bit of a letdown in that sense, but the first three were not. Absolutely were not. So I kind of like that we have something like that. And you see these all the time. Vasquez Marquez in boxing is a very similar kind of example. Ilele McFarland defeating Jessica Middleton, armbar, 2:15 of the first round. Gotta say, you're going to be like, well, Luke, you're being a hypocrite about UFC and Bellator. Bellator is not on the same level as the UFC. I'm not going to bag on Jessica Middleton. This is something that Bellator should have done better. Middleton had no business being in this fight, unfortunately. I'm sure she trains hard, and I'm sure she's very talented, but this seemed like too much for me. You know, she was getting pushed against the fence. She just wasn't doing things that pro fighters at this level should do. She wasn't really fighting for an underhook. She wasn't really getting her hips turned to the fence. She just wasn't really actively stopping the takedown. She gets taken down and then doesn't really do some of the things you're supposed to even attempt a mount stop. Look, if someone's really talented like Demian Maia, they're going to get it, but he's going to get it because he's going to trick you into giving the wrong kind of defense first and then go the other direction with misdirection, right? But you're going to see someone do the right thing first. They're just going to do the right thing in a wrong direction or a wrong setup. He gets you to do that. We didn't even really get that. That's sort of what I'm saying. So to me, it's like, did McFarland look good? Yes, but you know, some of the choices that Middleton was making in some of these exchanges just sort of told me that this might have been a bit too much for her. Saad Awad defeating Ryan Quinn, 32-7 across the board. He just beat the brakes off of him. How about AJ McKee? Good Lord. Defeating Dominic Mazzota, 1:15 of the first round head kick. McKee looked light on his feet. Mazzota even blocked it, and it didn't matter. The foot/ankle whipped around his hand and just caught him here and shut the lights out. Boom. He just went collapsing to the mat. Would have been KO of the weekend were it not for what Mike Perry and Iaquinta were able to do. Incredible, incredible win. Accurate, fluid, stayed out of trouble, made short work. AJ McKee he looks like he might be the real deal at featherweight. Great, great pickup for Bellator. And of course, Ed Ruth wins in his fight. Tyrell Fortune wins in his fight. Okay, those are the two big events from the weekend. Let's do this. Let's take a break. Not a break exactly, but let's go to the second segment of this podcast. Let's take a look, since you guys requested it, at the OSP Von Flue choke on De Lima. Let's do that now. Ovince Saint Preux submits Marcos Rogerio De Lima with a Von Flue choke. The second one of those he's gotten in the UFC, the first one against Nikita Krylov. How did he do it? Let's go through the slides to check it out. I've already linked previously my breakdown of how Brian Barberena caught Sage Northcutt in a Von Flue choke. And yes, it was a Von Flue choke. As I'll say it again, I said it before, go through my evidence for it. It is very clear that is a Von Flue choke. In fact, it's the same kind of Von Flue choke that someone gets from half guard. A little bit of a different application. There was more of a missile-style lean in a diagonal way. A different, or I should say, different kind of diagonal way from Barberena. Obviously, Saint Preux diagonal as well, but more lateral diagonal, more than top-down, sort of tripod diagonal. But in either case, both are Von Flue chokes from half guard. So it's proof that a Von Flue choke from half guard can be done, and it's proof that they can be quite lethal in the right hands, which is what you have here. Okay, so De Lima was doing pretty good in the first round, right? Using kicks to create some distance and land some heavy shots on OSP, disrupt his rhythm, and he was having some effect with them. But in the end, in the second round, which is where we are here, just 20 seconds in, Ovince Saint Preux catches one and drives the big man straight back. And what you're going to see here, I don't have the exact slide for it, but you'll see it later as well. This, to me, when I went back and I watched the tape, I was like, what can we really say about the grappling of De Lima? He's a big man, as you can tell, and he's got more of a powerlifter's build, whereas Ovince Saint Preux has more of a, so let's say, a bodybuilder's build. And that in of itself doesn't necessarily tell you a whole lot, but I've seen a lot of guys like this in a lot of gyms. And I'm betting that his top game, like if he gets on top, how good is his pressure? How good is his passing? How good is his sub-defense? If he's got energy and he's on top, I bet you his jiu-jitsu's just fine. It's on bottom like this when you're beat up and you're tired. It looks to me like underneath, he just doesn't find himself there very often. Now, granted, he was also drained from the weight cut which will affect him. But it's not just that. Yes, you make poorer decisions when you're fatigued, but he makes some decisions here that you'll see. I just don't think he spends a lot of time on his back. And I'm betting because he's so heavy and he's so strong, whenever he spars and rolls with guys, he often finds himself in top position. I'm not saying he never trains off of his back, but clearly I would argue that based on what I see here, I would suspect that there is a big discrepancy between the two, which is common for big men with that kind of body frame. Very, very, very common. All right, so you'll see he actually, I'll show this later, he extends out here. He's got feet on the hips, kind of like I think he has one foot on the hip, maybe one like butterfly hook, and he extends out here. But if you extend with your legs and you don't immediately follow with your upper body, you're just giving some guy a chance to advance his position, which is what he does. So he sits right into the guard. Okay, here we are. Wrap the head. Kind of got a wrap of an overhook here. Not great. Nice and tight. Full guard. This is where we are on the ground. Let's see what he can do from here. Both guys. And what you'll see is, first things first, he opens the guard and kind of tries to get to a side. That makes sense. You could potentially get a knee inside here, create a knee shield, get an underhook, maybe turn your elbow down while getting up a little bit, get your back to the fence in a more direct way, right? Begin to wall walk a little bit. Maybe that's what he's trying to do here. Okay, let's see how this goes. All right, Ovince Saint Preux raises him in the air, and now you can see that's when the knee shield kind of sort of goes in. Still protecting himself, but Ovince Saint Preux is going to the body. You're going to see Ovince Saint Preux just drill him here several times. Does a nice job of going to the body, then coming over the top to the head, or he'll go to the body and then sneak it through across his body, and then on the chin here of De Lima. So he has some nice ground and pound, actually, and cracks him with his elbow a few times, too. But he goes back to his knees, but now the guard is open. Okay, let's see what he's going to do with that guard. It looks to me like he doesn't really know what to do with the guard. So here's what he does. This is what I was talking about earlier. He does this twice in the span of 30 seconds. This, to me, is a super-duper red flag. He extends out. He pushes out. But look where he is. He's on the back of his tricep. It's not like he's on his elbow on his forearm where he's up a little bit. Yes, he's got a hand extended. Yes, he had a foot in the hip here. But if you extend out as a lengthy guy, even if you have more of a power lifter's build, if you extend out, it doesn't even matter what your build is, really. But especially if you're long, you have to be very mindful of this. You have to cover that space with your body, unless they're way far away. You have to do something. If you just extend out, you're giving someone the space they need to occupy the space you just opened up by extending. Very terrible idea. Very terrible idea. Common from guys who don't spend a lot of time on bottom. Very common. Very common. And as a bigger guy myself, I can tell you, and a lengthy guy myself as well, I can tell you this is a problem several years for me. You have to just spend time on your back. There's really no other way to get around it. So look what he does. I want you to notice here. Look what he does. All Saint Preux does is back off a little bit, grab the foot, step to the inside position. Now he's got control of it. He could go. I mean, he's not in the proper position for certain kinds of attacks, but look here. What are the legs of Rogerio de Lima doing? Are they controlling OSP? No. Are they retracted to the point where they're covering the ribs, right, to make it harder to pass, or if he needs to shrimp and recover, he could? No. They're just wildly extended. And is that knee really putting pressure on the hip there, keeping him away? No. All he did was push Saint Preux away. Like, people have this reaction when someone's on top of you sometimes. You'll see it a lot. This is what I mean when I say I don't think he spends a lot of time on his back. That's not the same as saying he doesn't train a lot of jiu-jitsu. It's saying he might have a really disproportionate way of training it. Because when you have a reaction like this where you're trying to just get someone off of you, yes, you're getting banged on. But what you actually want is you want them to be closer. When they're closer, they can't use as much distance to pound on you. When they're closer, you can set up an armbar easier. There are going to be times when you want to separate, but this is not one of them. All you're doing is elevating them and moving them into a position where they now have space to pass and they now have space to ground and pound. And look at this fist. Kaboom. Comes right down on it. What are his legs doing? You have to think about it. Your feet are your first line of defense. then your knees, then your hips. Of course, your hips aren't going to defend, but these are things they have to get past to get to you. And then your arms, and then your elbows. This is the line of attack that someone has to get past. When you extend like this, nothing is working. You're not creating any obstacles for them to do anything. You're just standing there. This was his chance before he got his ankle grabbed. He got it grabbed here too, I guess. But when he's here, push off and then immediately stand. Immediately start evasive maneuvers. You have to. Because if you just lay there, they're gonna bang on you. The guys who are good are going to bang on you. And now you've got nothing really protecting you. Even this foot's not in the other hip. This foot's not in the bicep. It's not in the shoulder. It's not. You could upkick here, and he's not doing that. This is really, really, really terrible. Really terrible. Right? So now, okay, he says enough of this. I want to get up. But you can see as a big guy like this, it's going to be a slow scramble. Look at OSP. He's in a really advantageous position. Has a nice base built under him. Now, you could say De Lima is trying to get an underhook, trying to get this leg to the outside. That's correct. But you'll see here, it just doesn't going to work. Plus, he's on his elbow, but on his tricep. You want to be elbow forearm. That's where you can begin to sit up, right? Here, he's just having to use core strength to roll over. So he does. Okay, now he's elbow forearm. This is better. But this is the problem with this. There's a lot of different things you can do here. You can go for deep half here. You can roll underneath, Homer Simpson sweep. My favorite from this position, first of all, his head's too low. You want to get your head up and in. If your head is getting pushed, look at his spine here. Look at the spine rotate over. You see that? He's just getting pushed over. Guys, it's not magic. If your head and your hips are going to get controlled, that's going to be harder for you to do anything. So what does he need to do here? He needs to get that straight head up high. My favorite on this one is I like to get the underhook here on this side, and you can see he's not really challenging the underhook. He's getting an overhook. That overhook in the right circumstance doesn't do anything. And I like to take my left leg, put it over their right leg, and then rotate clockwise in this particular case. Clockwise. One, you can stand up if you need to, because they're going to be worried about that whizzer, which is not going to be very powerful. Or you can just step over that leg, and remember, your head has to be way up, not down by the hip. But if your head is sort of in your chest, even under their chin to an extent, right? What you can do is, and you get your hand underneath you, not just your elbow, begin to really sit up. Then you can grab the back of this and double off in that direction. You actually can get a takedown from there. And even if you can't, if they try to avoid it, then you can just stand up. So this is okay in the sense he's on his hand. You got to be, or on his elbow. You need to be on your hand. Your head has to be way higher. You want a nice deep underhook. You want that left leg over their right leg. Suck it into you. It's not really just having it over. Step over, suck that heel to you, rotate out a little bit and double off, or just stand up. That's what's available to you. But he doesn't do that. Here's what he does. He just kind of goes. You can see him already. He might be going for deep half, but for deep half, man, you got to get. You have to bring your legs over. It's not just diving under with your hand. And look at this. He doesn't ever bring his he needs to fall to the shoulder and roll, and he's not gonna. Now OSP is just gonna sit down on his hips. He's almost curling OSP into him. It's just not. There's no mechanical advantage there. And this is this is just a terrible shot, right? It's good for laughs, but honestly, if you're De Lima, look at Saint Preux's knee. It's going to be buried in his chest. His weight is being driven down. So what does he do? He kind of falls to the side. This is not the same as rotating counterclockwise. Rotating counterclockwise would mean his hips rotate that way. He'd almost be facing, you can see Todd Grisham here. He just kind of leans over to a side. Now that's not nothing, because he's able to get to his base here a little bit, like that, right? That's okay. We're getting somewhere, but you can see how stretched out that arm protecting the back take is. You can feel how tired he is, because he's doing some of the right things, but in a really labored way, and not in an efficient way, and in a way where they're still leaving a lot of openings. So what does he do? He stands up, leans into him, and because he's too slow, he can't build anything underneath him. OSP is going to grab this and yank it out. Just like that. He's going to grab that ankle. And you can see De Lima's been taking a beating, right? We haven't gotten to all those shots, but trust me, he's taking a beating. So this is where the beginning of the end gets set up. Okay, now De Lima goes for a guillotine with no guard of any kind set up, which you don't necessarily have to. But in this particular case, I don't know what guillotine you'd actually really get from here, especially if it's arm in. Your guillotine is not just you crushing your arms. It's crushing your arms. Depending on the variety, you can use your lats, your core, your hips, your legs. There's a lot you can do. It's not just an arm crush, you know, which is what he looks like he's doing here. And you can see Saint Preux drives that right hand in, excuse me, that left hand in, pardon me, to fight it. Look at all the blood that's spilled off here. Okay, this is where he just begins to fall to a side. And this is the problem here. Now he's got the guillotine. He needs to let go here because there is no guillotine. There's nothing here. It might be tight. It might be uncomfortable. I am sure De Lima is a super strong guy. Doesn't matter. There comes the hand. Go back and watch, as I've linked it up now before, go back and watch what makes a Von Flue choke. You're going to see here in just a second. Couple of things. Number one, 2 things make a Von Flue choke. Typically, he would be rotated all the way past side control. If someone tries to guillotine you with their left arm, you jump cross body to their right side. If they try to guillotine you with your right arm, you jump cross body to their left side. He doesn't get all the way to that side, but he gets far enough, you'll see, obviously, because he gets the tap. But you want to go opposite side. If you have a half guard like this, I'm not saying you can't get a guillotine, but you would have to be, like, this is just, you'd have to be leaning on the other side. Does that make sense? Like, if you want to guillotine someone with your left, you need to be leaning on your left hip, especially if it's like, let's say, a Marcelo team kind of finish. He's leaning on his right hip for this. You have no leverage here. So this is, I mean, if there wasn't going to be a Von Flue choke, you're still not going to finish him, no matter what. But this is what you need. 1, the cross face. Doesn't matter if it's a Von Flue choke. Doesn't matter if someone's passing you. Doesn't matter the reason. Anybody who's watching who does jiu-jitsu, you know this is international signal for no me gusta, not going my direction. This is good for whoever has the crossface. This is bad for whoever is getting crossfaced. And it gets really bad if you can make someone turn their direction away and look away. That's when you really are beginning to just crunch down on them. I think I've talked about it before. I went into Marcelo's once, and Bernardo Faria was teaching the finer details of shoulder pressure, and I swear to God, I thought he was going to break my jaw. It was incredibly painful, and it also controls the spine. So just keep that in mind. The other one is this, and this is why it was. I don't care what anyone else says. It was a Von Flue choke on Sage Northcutt, because when they have the guillotine, the trick to the Von Flue is your arm has to go around theirs, and you have to trap this hand. And you'll see he does that right here. He brings his hands together. Now what's going to happen is, not only do you not have leverage because you're leaning on the wrong hip, and not only are you going to get your your face crossed up here in a terribly uncomfortable direction, but now your arm is trapped. Literally, if De Lima wanted to pull his left elbow out, he cannot. It is stuck because you go around that hand with, in this case, OSP's right arm, traps the left arm of De Lima, and you have to get a gable grip. And the one around here goes, the right hand should be palm down, although, you know, these guys will often just improvise to get it in the heat of battle. Now look at that. Look at him literally struggling. OSP, who's got to be, what, 220, walking around at least right here, minimum, on his toes, driving his weight down and on top, while that shoulder gets pushed into here. That's what's doing the choking. One arm, the left arm of OSP is choking this side of the carotid artery, and on this side, it's his own shoulder because this arm is trapped and the shoulder's being circled and pushed into it. It'd be easier if he was all the way across, because then you could really lean and get direct pressure, but you can see this is something pretty close. The only difference was the Barberino one, I think he was like opposite crossbody, which made it really bad. But you can see, just like on the choke on Northcutt, what makes it Von Flue is that the hands are trapped. If this isn't trapped, if this elbow's not trapped, he can just raise his hand in the air and there's no choke. Why? Because to be a side choke with that arm, you'd have to be on the other side. That's why. Trapping that hand is critical to everything. So, what does he do? He kind of sags his hips off because he doesn't want to burn himself out with the wrong position. He's just trying to find the right position to really get it. Look at his ribs. His ribs are pointing this direction. That means his shoulder is really diving in on the right way. And then eventually he gets the tap. So look at his body. While he is still trapped in half guard, look at the direction he has. It's almost perpendicular. He just sagged his hips off on top. He kind of just found the right weight on top, dropped his left hip to the ground. He still probably has live toes, although it's hard to tell. Maybe his knee is down, but it doesn't matter. Look at the right arm of De Lima, trapped. Look at that hand. He can't pull it out, yes, because there's a fence there. Even if there was no fence there, he can't get it out. This is what makes it a Vaughn flu right here. I mean, obviously, there's more than just this, but this is, if you don't have this hand trapped, you have no Vaughn flu, because all they have to do is put their hand in the air, and it might be tight, but it's not going to submit them. You don't have the mechanism to tighten it properly. You have to put a screw on both sides, and that's what happened here. Great job by Ovince Saint Preux. And last but certainly not least, let's take a look at what's coming up in the week ahead, and the answer is nothing. Well, there's MMA across the world, of course, but nothing from any of the major organizations. The next Bellator show, Bellator 179, is not till May 19th at the SSE Arena in London, England. I'll read that a little bit later in future editions of the podcast. And yes, the next UFC event is not until UFC 211, which will take place May 13th at the American Airlines Center. I will be in Dallas, Texas, at least for a portion of that fight week. If you see me, say hi, don't be weird. So there will be no podcast next week because I am going on vacation. Even if there were events, I wouldn't be doing them because I'm going on vacation. I will be out of the country. I will be in beautiful, sunny South America. So I will be back on the 8th of May. And then, of course, we have that fight week later that week. And you get the idea. So if you have any questions between now and then, you can email me, luke.thomas@sbnation.com. Please follow me on Instagram and Facebook. You can see the link at the bottom of the screen. I would really appreciate that. Give this video a like, a thumbs up, and share it with all the folks you know. Subscribe to the MMA Fighting channel. Thank you guys so much for watching this podcast. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Until then, enjoy the fights.